Hello, my name is Jonathan Chandler and I'm the owner and operator of Fox Ridge Arms. We're continuing our series of updating our knife making kit instructions. This is going to be part number 4, and we are changing our pieces that we have received in our kit into a hardened and tempered blade at this point. In the previous videos we have shown you how to rough shape and cut in our bevels, harden this blade, and temper the blade using the oven. And so this is what it looks like after it is coming out of the temper and oven. This is our temper color that we've got. I don't know how well it shows on the video, but it is a dark straw, light brown. Alright, so we're up to this point with our knife build. We've got both pins in, we've got our hardened and tempered blade, we've got our handle scales rough shaped, and so the next step is we're going to polish this blade, and we have saved our sandpaper that comes in the kit, most of it for these last few steps. Thus far, to get our blade to this point, we have used this much sandpaper. We've used 2 pieces that are this size of the 150. We used one. These 2 are 150. This one is 220. This one is 400. So we've used this much sandpaper out of the kit that we've got. So to do our final polishing and to finish our handle, we still have this much 100 grit, we have this much 220 grit, we have this much 400 left, and this much 600. We haven't touched our 600. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go back to our 400 grit. We're going to put this back in our vise, the blade itself back in the vise, and we're going to polish the blade, not necessarily up where the handle is, but up to the point that the knife scale is going to start. We're going to take our 2 blocks of wood that we've been using to polish with, and we're going to wrap some new sandpaper around it. We're getting a piece of 400 first. And we're going to polish that right up. Alright, that looks pretty good. We'll get our little bitty stick. I got the same piece of sandpaper we were just using. We're just going to use the very edges of it with our little bitty stick. And we're going to sand right up against this. I can do it and show it to you. Sand right up against this plunge line here, so that gets the same finish the rest of the knife does. And that's pretty good. And we're going to do 600 grit while we got it on this side. This is our 600 grit little slip. Alright, I think that's looking pretty good. Once we glue the handle on this, we'll come back and polish it a little bit more. But it's much easier to get this area here now without the handle on it than it will be later. So we're going to polish this just a little bit more once we get the glue and everything took care of on the handle. Alright, we're back. We got this side polished up to 600. We're just going to take a normal everyday sheet of paper, and then fold it up a couple of times. And we want to cover up most of the blade. So I'm going to make a little fold in it like that, catch our edge, figure out where we want to put it, wrap this around reasonably tight. Some people will tape this on hard and where you can't move it. I generally don't do that. I put some tape on it. I kind of make a makeshift little sheath for this. You don't have to use electrical tape. You can use whatever you got. This is what I've got. And so I kind of make a little makeshift sheath for this, so we can handle it without. It's not crazy sharp right now, but it is getting sharp. So we're going to make it so it protects us a little bit. So we do that. We've got our handle in our vise now. We've got a piece of leather, just a scrap piece of leather. It could be an old belt, could be a shoe tongue, could be just anything. It could be a piece of cardboard, just something to protect it from those teeth of the jaws. We've got it oriented so that the blade would be sitting this way out of the top of it. We've got our pins in it. This is both pieces. I've just cleaned up my files with my file card. That's what this thing is. Usually some version of this will come in with your little kit of files. That's what it's for. And if you notice your file has lines in it, they're usually at a diagonal. You follow those lines, push forward, and that's how you clean a file. Alright, we got our file cleaned. This is our 4-in-hand. Like I said, this was the one I usually save back for the woodworking. What I want to do is, where we sawed this, it's a little bit askew. We want to flatten it, get it 90 degrees to the handle, to the side rather, and then we're going to bevel this off both sides. We're going to try to get this end of it. This is the part where the blade would be sticking out like this. This is the part that's the hardest to finish later after we glue up the handle. So we want to work on this first, get our piece to where it needs to be now before we start having to work about scratching up our blades doing this. Much easier to do it now. And again, moving my position on the flat. And we can always stop and look at it, see what it's looking like. See if it's looking close. And look this way. This is the bottom of my handle. That's where my finger would be. I'm going to take and we flattened it off pretty good. It's pretty level. I'm going to start and bevel this corner forward. I'm probably going to leave this corner alone. We'll get that at the end. But I'm going to bevel this one forward just slightly. Make it a little bit rounded. And for that, we can switch over to our much coarser side for a minute or two. Just taking the last little bit. This is our wore out sandpaper from before that we had when we were doing the blade. And we're just going to sand this front edge. Most of this will be changed later, but right here where it touches the blade, the metal part, is not going to get changed. So we want to get it to what we want it now. It's going to be important that we get that like we want it. And we'd like to file with the grain, which is this direction, even though it's the hardest direction to try to file. Sand with the grain this direction if we can. And this is our 220, and we're going to run all the way up to 400 with this on this end. We're not sanding nothing else on the handle at this point, just this very end where it touches the metal, because we're going to glue the handle on next. And we would like this to be done. And just take a paper towel and wipe it off. And so we want that slick smooth and feeling right and looking good. No additional marks or anything that we want to get rid of. If we do, we want to get rid of them now. We've got our handle, we've got our pins. We're going to see what they look like when we put them together. Got the nose of our handle done. And we're going to check our fit along this area all the way around to make sure there's no gaps. If there's a gap, and we got to make sure our paper's not in the way. That's why I make my little sleeve there so it'll come out. At this point, you want to check your holes and make sure they don't have any burrs on them. This one has a little bit of a burr on it still, so I'm going to go get rid of that. This is what I use. It's a 5-minute epoxy. You can get it in any of the big box kind of stores. But you can use Gorilla Glue, you can use super glue, you can use any kind of glue that'll glue wood to metal is what you're looking for. Wood to metal. And I've already poured it out here on our plate. And notice I didn't pour it on top of each other. I put them beside each other, and that way it extends our, till we mix it up, it's not activated. So if we got to go get something, or we forget, the phone rings or whatever, at this point we can stop. I'm gonna do something that I do every time, and I'm gonna put an X with a Sharpie or a marker of some kind on the side that I want the glue to go on. And then that way, that just makes certain that I don't get in a hurry and forget what I'm doing. So we're just going to check the edges of this, make sure it's all good to go. We went and just hit our holes with the file first, and then just touched up with the same little wore out piece of sandpaper just to scratch it up a little bit. Alright, so we're ready to go now. We got all our pieces, they're fitting together. We're going to take we've got just a little stick here. It's just a skewer, a toothpick would work. I like these, they're a little bigger than a toothpick, and I kind of flatten it like a paddle on one end. And so I'm going to stir it up here. Take your time stirring this up. Make sure it's stirred up well. If it's not stirred up, it won't work. So stir it up well. Take about 30 seconds and really stir this thing up good. Scratch it one way then the next and stir. And they call this 5-minute epoxy. It's not been my experience that it dries completely in 5 minutes. It starts drying in 5 minutes, but anyway, not quite what they're claiming. Alright, we got it stirred up good. We're going to get our, and I'm going to pull our pins out just a smidge. And then we're just going to take this, and we don't need like a great big glob and gop on this. Sometimes people get excited with this. We just want to smear it out here in a nice even coat. And I'm only worried about this front edge as far as getting it on it. I've worked hard to get that front edge up to where it's pretty close to what I want for the final, and I'm just going to get a little bit up there, not going to let it run over that edge at all. The other edges, it's much easier to get off. We're going to file and sand it off of those. Much easier to get off. Alright. We're going to just smear this out in a nice even coat. We can poke some down in these holes. Just make sure the holes are getting plenty. And then we're just going to take off the excess. Like I said, we don't want a big glooping mess here. We just want this to have some glue on it. Doesn't take a lot. And make sure we get it off of this front edge. And I've held it back on that edge just a smidge, because when we squish it down, it's going to squish out. Alright, now this is where our planning ahead has worked. We're getting our piece to line up. We're getting our pieces to stick through here, and we're going to set that aside for a moment. We're going to work quickly, and we're going to get this other piece on here. And you don't have to be in a crazy hurry, but you do want to not be drinking your coffee at this point. And then get off what we can, and we can poke some down in those holes, and that'll help glue our pin in. And again, just staying off that front edge. The edge closest to me is the front edge, getting a nice even coat. And then we're going to work our pins through the holes here. Alright, then we're going to get our glue out of the way. We're done with that part. And we're going to push our pins all the way through now. Get them in the center. And we're going to work on our clamps. Best to set up your clamps prior to now. I had these close. I'm going to take this little one and put it in the middle. And then we're going to take these larger ones, one either side. Since we've got an extra one here, we're going to put one more on the top here and clean up our front. That actually helps. So we're going to pull this off real quick. We're going to use our fingernail polish remover, acetone, and we're going to clean up that blade. If there's any glue on the blade, now is the time to get that off. Don't wait. Now is the time. And I see some sticking out this front, even though I took my time and don't just smear it around. Take and fold your paper towel over. And I've got another little clean little stick here. And I'm sticking it in there, and we're getting that glue off. And this is where your speed needs to be. If you're going to do speed anytime, here's it is. Before this stuff dries. Because that is the royal pain to try to get off if you don't get it off now. Let's go back with a dry one to dry up the wood a little bit. Been my experience, the acetone doesn't really bother the wood. If anything, we're going to sand it again, so it's not going to really show. And if it would happen to show, be real obvious, just wipe the whole thing down with acetone. We have let our knife handle dry overnight. It has had about, I don't know, 8 hours, 10 hours to dry. Alright, next step is all we're going to do is we're just going to take our pliers and cut these extra pins off here. Don't need that anymore. Turn the pliers back over. Then we're just going to start shaping our handle. Alright, first thing we'll do is take those pins down a little bit more. The pliers won't get but so close. And we're using our leather in our vise here again to not mar up our handle. So we'll just do that on the other side. And that's what it looks like. We've got it both sides flushed up. Now, what I generally do is take it down to our profile this direction with our file. If you've got a belt sander or if you've got a vibrating sander, put some rough grit on it and do that. You do that as well with those. The file will works pretty fast, and again, we're protecting our wood with some kind of leather or even cardboard, something that will keep it from biting, our vise biting into it. Because at this point we're getting down to where we want it to be. And I've just got a reasonable, this is not a rasp, this is a file. We just got a reasonable rough file. Okay, that's just how long it took us to get down to the metal. Doesn't take very long. I'm gonna flip it over and do the other side in the end here, and we'll bring you back. And be careful that you don't file on your blade at this point. We've got it cleaned up pretty good. We want to keep that from getting scratched. We're just trying to get down to our metal that we have. We'll get so close and we'll get us a half round file. And this file is a little smoother feeling file. It's not as rough as the first one. And so we're just going to go around and kind of go back over this and get her smooth. At this point, we're just going to take a few minutes and sit and hold it, see if we like it. I generally go back in and sit down and watch TV for a little while. It's taken us approximately 10 minutes to get this to handle to this point. We've done the profile with the files. But at this point I want to sit and hold it and see if I want to change that profile. At this point in the game we can change the profile pretty easy. Our sides are still flat. We still hold it in the vise real easy. It's not marring up anything that we're going to keep. So this is the time to sit and put some time into just holding this and figuring out what you want to do, where you want to file down or sand down or whatever you're using to do this with. Usually I'm a fan of kind of the narrow or narrowest part kind of being right in here and tapering back to fatter. Some people will put a narrow part here and a narrow part here and it'll be fattest in the middle. That's another choice. Some people just have flat scales. That's another choice. You don't have to have any kind of contour in them, but we have plenty of meat here. We've given you plenty of wood, so if you choose to, you can put a contour in this. If you're going to just have a flat scale, that's okay. It's just you're just needing to make it thinner this way, and so with our contours we can leave it the fattest at the end is what I'm going to do, probably pretty close to this same dimension, and just neck it down in here pretty good, and then we'll round over the corners and use our sandpaper at the end and finish it up. Alright, I'm just going to take a minute or two, and I've drawn what I think I want on this side, and I'm going to draw it on here now that it's still flat and everything, so I can kind of gauge what it looks like. And generally I start where it's the thinnest and kind of work my way out and try to make it look as even as I can. Sometimes it's as easy as just making a curve, and this one may need to be trimmed to match it. And this is just a rough guide. I want some marks on this so that I'm not going too fast, too low down too fast. Once we put this in the vise, it's hard to hold it, so it's you know, you can always take it out of the vise, but once we get it in the vise, it's a little more harder to kind of feel and see if it's doing right or not. If you've got a belt sander, this would be the time to pull it out and use it. You could easily put it on the nose of the belt sander and do these shapes here. We're going to do it with a file, but definitely could be done other ways. A little bit of a stopping mark up here so I know where I want to basically stop. And we got us a big old half round file. I think we're going to start us a little bit of a groove down here. Right in the deepest part and right on that pin. That's going to be the hardest thing to file, is the pin. It'll be harder than the wood. I'm not going to go all the way to my line, but almost. Alright, so we've got that one side cut down to the line, and I cut right on top of my pin, so that's out the way now. And I'm just going to knock this corner off. Till we get us a start of being round. Well, I've got a nice big... I've got a nice big to spin that so that we're getting a big radius here. Alright. So we're down to our line on the back, especially. The front could use a little more, but that's what we're going for. So I'm going to go do that, and we'll bring you back. Alright, that's where we're at. I've been feeling it some, and like I say, this is the time you want to sit down and really put it in your hand and turn it around and see what it feels like. I want this part to be fatter, but this is too fat still, so we're going to work on filing that down a little bit, just taking some, I think, just straight off here. I might file it slightly at an angle back, but we'll put it back in the vise and see what we can get done. Alright, we'll switch to our little bit finer file. And as you can see, in just a few seconds, really, we can take off some significant wood there. And I'm just going to bring you back when we get this side looking like that side. Alright, we're back. Got that side. They're looking fairly similar. That's what we're wanting at this point. I shrunk down this a little bit, and I tapered this back from our original depth here. We just tapered it back. And that's feeling pretty good. I like that feel. I got a little work to do right up here. These aren't quite level yet, so we'll play with that a little bit. With a little teeny file or even a piece of sandpaper wrapped on a stick, we can do that. I'm probably going to go ahead and tape this off now, because we don't want to miss and hit our blade with our file or our sandpaper and so forth. But basically, at this stage, once you get the profile of the handle like you like, and you get this side of the handle, the top and bottom like you like, and you've looked at any little details like this little area, all you got to do next is just round the corners over. And so you can do that with the file. You can take a little pocket knife and come along here and knock the corners down. Probably the fastest way to do it. Just watch your grain if you're going to try that, and on the end grain, you have to go across it like this. Knock you like a 45-degree bevel around all the way around this edge, and then we'll just sand it up. Alright, I'm going to show you how to carve your handle. This is probably the fastest way at this point. It's getting harder and harder to hold it in the vise. We're getting thinner and thinner scales on it, so it's getting harder to pinch it without tearing them up. So we're just going to take a little carving knife. You don't have to have this. You can have just a regular pocket knife. And we want to look at our grain. We don't want to split this off, so we want to carve towards the grain, in the direction of the grain instead of against it. So right here on this portion, you can see that it's the grain is running this way. Before we start carving, we're going to cover up our blade again, keep it from poking us. It's not quite sharp yet, but this will keep it from getting scratched up too as we're working on it. But as you're seeing the grain of this handle, we don't want to split the grain off, we want to cut it. So this grain is actually on this bottom edge is running in like this, so we're going to follow it in a little bit. And all we're trying to do is just cut off, and you got to switch direction some. We're just trying to cut off a 45. Kind of just like in blacksmithing, you go from square to octagon to round. It's the same in wood carving. You go from square to octagon to round. Alright, right here's what we got. We just knocked off the corners with our carving knife. At this point, we're just going to take our file and hold it in our hand, and we're just going to knock off the corners that we've put on there. Doing our carving to make it basically start making it look like a octagon. You could do a little more with the knife if you chose, but particularly back here on the end grain, the file works pretty good. We can start with our rough sandpaper and either wrap it around the stick, a piece of wood, or just in your fingers. If you're trying to make something round, a piece of wood, and just like we're using the file and we're rotating the piece underneath the file, a piece of wood with this piece of sandpaper wrapped around it do the same kind of thing. But I'm going to take this thing and I'm just going to sit and hold it for a little while and make sure it's what I want before I start sanding it. Alright, there's our knife handle. I've just taken another minute or two and took our little fine file here and just went around, and as I was filing I was turning the handle like that back and forth basically. And no sandpaper's been used on this yet, and so we're at that point. We're just going to go right around with our sandpaper, and we're still using the sandpaper that was in our kit. We've still got that much of the 150, which will be more than enough for what we're going to do with it. And so we're just going to take us another piece here. And we're just going to sand with the grain. Alright, and that's feeling better and better. I'm going to check right along the front edge here, get all that just like we want it, and finish sanding with our 220 and our 400, and then we're going to take a good look at it at that point. We're up to 400 grit on our knife, and so we're going to take our 600 grit and we're going to do the handle just a little bit. And we're going to go over our blade really good and just check it and make sure that we're not got any scratches in it at this point, and then we'll get ready to sharpen it. I've spent a few minutes sitting around watching TV, holding the handle, deciding if it was good enough to start putting the finish on. I touched up a couple little areas that I felt a little nick in. Take your time doing this step, feeling it, holding it in your hand. Time to fix any issue is now, prior to us putting the finish on. The finish I'm going to use, I keep it in this little glass jar here, and it is 50% beeswax and 50% walnut oil. I'm in the house, I'll heat it up in our microwave, and that's what we're looking for. Is we're looking for something that's going to be solid at room temperature. Now this is a walnut handle. This will work for any wood, but the walnut oil really seems to do a little bit extra for the walnut handle. It's just straight oil, and so we're going to just put a little bit, on our handle. And this is a food safe finish, is the reason I'm mentioning this. You can put anything you want on this. You put shellac on it, you can put polyurethane on it, you can put stain on it, you can do whatever you want to. When I fix knives to sell, I always fix them with a food safe finish. You never know what the person's going to do with it, and so I use this finish on most all of my woodworking type stuff, and including the beeswax, and walnut oil mix. And we want to make sure and get this on the end grain. the end grain on our handle would be up here and back here. The end grain is going to soak this up more than the side of the knife, so we're going to make sure we're getting it on that end grain. And this finish is hot. It's not crazy hot. I just heated it up to where it melted. Alright, we've got our walnut oil, straight walnut oil on our handle. Now we're going to go through and we're going to put some of the beeswax walnut oil 50/50 on this. And when this cools off, it will be solid, and it'll feel good, and it'll be sealed up the wood. The wood will be sealed with the beeswax. And it's alright if you get this on the blade, it won't hurt the blade at all. And again, get it on the end grain for sure so it soaks in. Well, we've put one coat of walnut oil on first, straight walnut oil, and then we used our mixture of 50% walnut oil and 50% beeswax. And this is just after one coat, and you can put as many coats of this on as you need. I think I'm going to stop here. It's plenty good. You can reapply this finish at any point. You know, it probably is a good idea to do that once a year or so if you choose to use this finish. But this will last a long time without having any problems. Next step is we're going to sharpen up our blade. We're going to use whatever method that you use to sharpen a knife. I'm going to use a file to start with. We've got our primary bevel in. We're going to just tilt our knife just slightly and put a secondary bevel on it, and then we'll use a stone and a couple of different stones, and then we'll strop it. A fairly smooth file chucked up in our vise here. We're going to use it to put our secondary bevel on. And we'll start over here next to our plunge line. And that's what it looks like. Doesn't take a whole lot. We're just wanting a small secondary bevel. We don't want to scratch up our blade, so that's why we're doing it this way. Alright, now we're starting to get her. Once you start getting you can feel the edge up all the way up, then you want to make a couple of long smooth strokes on each side with this to knock off any extra little bits that any nicks or anything we've put in it doing this. And so that's what it looks like. Both sides. This is just an inexpensive sharpening stone, and it's a wet stone, so I just wet it. A stone like this you can buy them for under $20. I actually sell some just like this one for $8, and it has two sides, a smooth side and a coarse side. We're going to start on the coarse side. I'll scoot it over here. So that's what it's doing. And sharpening a knife is its own skill. It's pretty sharp. We'll switch over to our little stone, even finer. Just a stroke or two of off that grit. Switch over to our leather, and we'll drop it on it. And we're feeling to see if we got a burr. If we still feel a burr on it, we're not sharp yet. We're going to drop it harder. And you can actually use cardboard to strop with. Leather is the best, of course. But like I say, go to Goodwill, get you an old pair of shoes, leather shoes, and cut the tongue out of it. You got a piece of leather you can use for this. Or have old work boots that you've been worked in. And we have put a few scratches in that, and we'll touch those up here in a minute. Let's see if we got something that'll cut. Going pretty good. Not too bad. Cuts heel to toe, that's what we want. It's grabbing a little bit right there in the back. So we might teach to touch the back up just a little bit, but she cuts heel to toe pretty good. We'll do just a smidge more on the back, and we're going to call this done. We're going to call that pretty good. Now, how to get your scratches out that we put in doing our bevels. We got just a few scratches. Best way to do that is get our little piece of wood that we had. We're just going to get our 400 grit. We're going to roll it on our little block of wood. This is a new piece of sandpaper. Watch your fingers because this is sharp, and we're just going to lay this down. We're not following that new bevel, we're just following the original bevel. And that'll bring us back to 400 grit. You can look at it and see if that's doing it for you. If you got crazy deep ones, you might have to go back through all the grits, but we've still got paper for that. So if we have to, we can do that. To lay it up on a little something. Get that tip. And then flip it over. Do the same on the other side. Get the scratches out of it. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. May have just a couple of scratches left, but that's more than decent. More than decent. Okay. So we've got our knife made. We've got our handle on. We've got our handle cleaned. Since we've been working with the stones and the files and such, we may have a little grit on our handle. Buff that off. Get the grit off of our knife. And I see a few just tiny more scratches there that I'd probably get off if I was going to sell this. Now I'll take care of that before we take selling it. And this knife will probably be on sale on Etsy, and our next video, which I'm going to try to link in our picture here, is going to be how to make a sheath for it. So the first kit we sold was the knife making kit, and that's what we've used to make this knife. And the next series of videos will be how to make a sheath for this knife, or for any knife. The sheath making kit was a request after we got to making the knife kits. Everybody was wanting to know how to get a sheath for it, so we just went ahead and set up a sheath making kit as well. And we'll do a series of videos on that, how to use that kit. Alright, if you've liked the videos, please like, subscribe, comment, do what you need to do with the videos. If you want to check us out on Etsy, please feel free to do that. We have a website for the Virginia School for Traditional Arts. It'll be in the link below as well, so you can check out the classes if you want to come and take a class with us. And happy knife making.